let there be hope, fans of Wolfenstein, that Machine Games is almost certainly working on Wolfenstein 3. And it might even be the next project in development from the studio. Despite several rumors saying that they're actually hard at work on the next entry, Indiana Jones and the Great Sequel. I'm coining that. If Machine Games, you can use that for the title, I give you permission. Now, this information does come from a job posting. Normally, I don't like to spend too much time fixating on them. This one in particular very much caught my interest. And if you want to skip just to the news, I will leave timestamps down in the description. I don't want to waste anybody's time, but I've been on this rabbit hole of a journey trying to sort through what the hell has been going on at Machine Games, because there's been a lot of rumors pointing to an Indiana Jones sequel that's currently in the works. There's also been a canceled project that happened quietly at Machine Games, many of which speculated was actually Wolfenstein 3 following the success of Indiana Jones, as they just worked to make another entry in that franchise. But I don't think that's the case. So let's get started just right off the bat with the job posting. Again, I don't want to waste anybody's time, but then we're going to dive into the history of the studio. There's an interesting caveat to all of this, which is to say that in the responsibilities section for this new senior gameplay animator position, they highlight wanting NPC, both enemy and companion animations, which companions would be new for Wolfenstein. Typically, you're going in alone for most of those missions. But they also want player both first and third person animations with a focus on style, playability, and flow. Now, with the flow word in particular, gears my head immediately to Indiana Jones, the way you seamlessly pull the camera back to the third person animations when you're doing certain functions in the game. However, I would not rule out the possibility that there could be some co-op element to the next Wolfenstein entry that capitalizes on what they did in Wolfenstein Youngblood. Or alternatively, if they have in-engine cutscenes as opposed to something pre-rendered, because there's such a cinematic storytelling focus in Wolfenstein, they would need all of that to be animated from the third-person perspective. So it also makes sense there, especially if you want it to flow seamlessly into the gameplay portions. There's a second piece of information in this listing that ties it a bit closer to Wolfenstein. That second part of information specifically states animating creatures, animals, robots, and other non-human characters, which that is immediately Wolfenstein. There's only been one instance that I can think of. I'm no Indiana Jones expert by any means, but only one instance where robots have appeared in Indiana Jones, and that was from a game way back when on the N64, the Game Boy Color, and the PC called Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine. Now, the reality of the situation is most likely Machine Games simply wants to hire a person that can work across both titles. The game plan for Machine Games very likely seems to be Wolfenstein 3 and Indiana Jones sequel. Those are the two next major releases coming from the studio. The order is up for debate for certain. However, they need someone who can do both games. Now, if that's not enough, there's the rest of the video that we're going to dive into, where I've really spent a lot of time diving into what's been going on at Machine Games. I really think it's important when talking about Machine Games to dive into the assumption or an underlying rumor that the games weren't successful for Wolfenstein, which is pretty far from the truth, actually. We only have estimates. There's not a lot of discussion on player counts or sales numbers, of course. Many of these games were released while ZeniMax was still a private company and Bethesda was part of a private company. But from the estimates that we can gather, it's actually speculated from VG Insights that Wolfenstein The New Order made $58.1 million in sales. Wolfenstein The Old Blood, the expansion, $17.4. The New Colossus made $50.2, which seems pretty good, but actually probably could have been better if certain circumstances were different, which we're going to dive a bit into. And it wasn't really until Wolfenstein Youngblood and Wolfenstein Cyberpilot, which was a VR spin-off in the series, so understandably those sales are going to be a bit lower, but at least on the critical side, both of them, and financial side, really didn't have the payout that you thought, which honestly arguably makes sense when you make not one, not two, but 4 entries into a single franchise back to back to back to back. sort of seems like a bit of a cry of help with Wolfenstein Youngblood in hindsight. They were like, please, let us just work on something else. Wolfenstein 2 in particular was really interesting because that game released on the same day as Assassin's Creed Origins, as well as Super Mario Odyssey. Yes, very different, but when you're looking at $60 games and you only have, they were $60 back then. Way back in the 2019 times. Better days. When you only have so much discretionary income to spend on games, you have to prioritize what you're going to buy, and that absolutely played a factor. But it was also sandwiched with Destiny 2 that released shortly after, as well as Call of Duty World War II that released in early November. So all around, you had first-person shooters, you had adventure games, you had a mix of all different types of stuff. And Wolfenstein might have been a bit lower on the priority scale for many gamers. And when I say that people's financial interests were in other games, you could sort of look at that with the number of viewership that Wolfenstein 2 actually had on Twitch, which was 3.1 million watch hours. Substantial, massive for a Wolfenstein game, given it's a single-player, linear, story-driven, right, first-person shooter. That's some pretty good numbers. I bring this all up to explain that there shouldn't be any financial concern that a sequel doesn't make sense for Machine Games to work on. And now with a Wolfenstein TV show that's currently in the works, it's clear that there's enough interest. It needs to be commercially viable as well as critically viable. There's enough interest with both to continue expanding on that franchise outside of its core audience in gaming, but into TV, film, and media as well. And we know absolutely that they're looking at numbers such as what happened with Fallout, thinking it could possibly even inject new life into the franchise. After the Fallout TV series released, there was a spike, more than double the amount of players hopping across 76, across Fallout 4, even New Vegas, a much older title, because of the TV show. It would be absolutely insane for Bethesda, for Microsoft, whoever, to look at the results after the Fallout TV show and think to themselves, yeah, no, we could pass on that a second time. That's totally fine. It would make zero sense. And if that's the conversation that's happening, I really want to be sitting in that room trying to understand what the logic is. Now, things did turn around with Wolfenstein Cyberpilot, a VR spin-off that had about a 50 Metacritic score, was not very well received, as well as Wolfenstein Youngblood, which especially, it's just a recipe for disaster, that one.
It is grindy as all fuck, inconsistent, microtransactions just jammed in to fix the problem of grind that they create, and awful, annoying characters. Hell yeah, dude!
You had a single-player studio working on a multiplayer game with live service elements and traded the FPS for some RPG stuff that they were it was just, no. Now enter Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Critical commercial success beyond what Machine Games is historically, I think, used to because of the widespread renown for Indiana Jones as an IP. This title was so successful that Jez Corden on the Xbox 2 podcast mentioned that Disney picked up the phone and was almost instantly interested in more Indiana Jones games, and Machine Games themselves said, we really want to continue to work on this IP, to work on Indiana Jones more, and there's more stories to be told, which is a great sign because, quite frankly, the game was amazing. A DLC for the game was already planned. It came as bundled with the premium edition of the game, and it's the Order of Giants. Whether or not we'll continue to see more after that, that's a bit of a question. But job postings that started coming out following the release of Indiana Jones and the Great Circle hinted at the possibility Indiana Jones was going to be the main focus for Machine Games going forward. Interestingly, there was a job posting that specifically called out multiple times someone with experience in the entertainment industry, specifically films, which a lot of people instantly start speculating it has to be Indiana Jones. And there's several other coincidences that pointed to this likely being the case. For starters, you have Xbox themselves that's been doubling and tripling down on safer projects. You see something like Marvel's Blade, instead of Arcane working on the next Dishonored, work on this licensed IP. Indiana Jones, certainly more of a safe venture for Machine Games to work on than their own original Wolfenstein IP. You have 3 not one, not two, three Fallout projects allegedly in development following the success and resurgence of Fallout 76, the success of the TV show and how that brought in new players. So therefore, safe venture. And the final nail in the coffin for all of this is when Timmer, all-around great guy, friend of the channel, discovered on LinkedIn that a developer at Machine Games had highlighted specifically an unannounced, canceled project. So now we're all thinking, all right, that was it. Wolfenstein, it's done. Indiana Jones is the new baby. This is what's happening, and we just have to accept that fact. It was definitely a surprise when the TV show was greenlit. But what if I told you that I don't think that unannounced game was actually Wolfenstein 3? In 2023, Tech for Gamers found a job posting that specifically wanted somebody who had online matchmaking services experience or knowledge, and this was really quite peculiar, but I suspect that this was the canceled project. It's possible that Wolfenstein 3 will have some evolution of the gameplay multiplayer co-op formula that was in Youngblood. Maybe. It's possible that they want to have some kind of competitive element in Wolfenstein, which I could absolutely see if they're trying to do something new for the franchise, similar to the smaller multiplayer mode that we had in Doom Eternal. But ultimately, with a canceled project, I would speculate that this multiplayer one is in fact what's been canceled. Wolfenstein 3 currently in development. The reality is Machine Games is likely working on both Indiana Jones sequel as well as Wolfenstein 3 simultaneously, but Wolfenstein 3 very well could be the next title that we get from them. We know that Machine Games is no stranger to releasing back-to-back sequels, so very well it could be that the order is flip-flopped. However, at some point in time, we're getting both entries, and that I think should get a lot of fans excited. But let me know your thoughts about Wolfenstein 3. What did you and didn't you like about Wolfenstein 2? Or any of the Wolfenstein games? Let me know down in the comment section below. Thank you guys for sticking out. I hope you enjoyed this journey through Machine Games, and I'm excited to hear what you all have to say. Thank you, and I hope to see you all next time. So long, everybody.